Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this roundtable. I'm really privileged to have this fantastic panel of finance leaders from some of the leading corporates in India. In an increasingly volatile environment, due to the geopolitics of war, due to the economic impact of interest rates and inflation, CFOs are looking for ways to bring resilience to their organizations. In a survey conducted by McKinsey on CFOs, they found two areas which were very important to build this resilience. And what is resilience about? It's about protecting the organization from adversity and at the same time finding ways to continue and sustain growth in the organization. So that's what resilience is. And the two main themes which you would explore for that is, one is capability building across the organization and use of technologies, advanced technologies such as artificial intelligence, data analytics, cloud, all of those to help the organization navigate these challenges. And that's one of the themes that we will explore today. Growing concerns about climate change and consequently regulations around climate, appropriate behavior, around ESG disclosures have brought a sense of urgency and importance to this topic among the CFO community, not only in India but around the world. And whereas delivering ESG reporting is only one aspect, I think it's important to see how sustainability is beginning to play a role in business strategy and in the ways organizations are operating their day-to-day business, not merely reporting about it. So these are some of the themes. I think it's been very well selected topics by the BCS in terms of this panel, which is to discuss technology, innovation, and sustainability, which are, I think, today some of the top priorities for the CFOs. So without much ado, let me open this conversation. And I'm really confident with the experience that we have on this panel, you will get a deep insight into the strategies on these topics. I would request you to once again welcome the eminent panel with a round of applause, please. The first, I think, question that comes to mind often is that in this fast-changing world, how do you allocate capital and resources to innovation and emerging technologies? If you just think about it, about a year and a half back, there was no talk about Gen AI, and all of a sudden it's a buzzword. How do you react when you're making budgets for 12 months and 24 months when you have all of a sudden such technologies which come up? But Nitin bhai, for your company, this is actually a way of life, right? Because in healthcare, you need to be watching for trends, innovations, new products all the time. So how do you go about this dealing with innovation? How do you plan for capital allocation towards innovation?
Thank you. First of all, I thank Bombay Chartered Account Society for having this kind of roundtable conference and inviting us. On the question of capital allocation, it has always remained a very important agenda for CFO. In Zydus, we invest about 20 to 25% of our EBITDA every year in capital expenditure to build state-of-the-art plants for manufacturing various pharma products. We also invest 7 to 8% of our revenues in R&D for research and development, of which about 55% is for generic product development, but 45% is for innovative products. When I say innovative products, I include new chemical entities, basic research, new biological entities, vaccines for unmet needs. But that is the huge expenditure that we do. Apart from this, there is a culture part in terms of innovation in the organization. And our chairman, Mr. Pankaj Patel, tells, don't get worried about failure. Fail fast, learn from every failure, and never lose hope of success. I think that's the DNA of the organization which helps us in terms of continuing innovating efforts. While in basic research, the probability of success is very low, the gains and payoffs also can be disproportionate. And more than money, it is the satisfaction of serving unmet medical need of the human beings for global citizens. I think that is at the core, that drives the innovation efforts. Apart from pharma-related innovation in terms of various technology, including digital, we have been making a lot of investments. We've been creating platforms for doctors connect, patients connect. We have been investing in a small measure in a partnership mode with various new technologies. And the idea is keep investing in that. We have not found a real kind of difficulty in terms of a trade-off between short-term and long-term, because we believe that for pharma, this is the way of life. And continuing innovation allows us to also sustain and grow the future rather than only preserving the present one. Thank you.
So, you took those words from me off. I was going to ask you about short-term and long-term. But Nitin, by investing community and analysts are often not very charitable to short-term fluctuations. Have you ever found that to be a pressure?
So in India, we find that investors in general don't value your R&D for basic research because of the probability of success being very low, unlike in various foreign countries. But over last 4 or 5 years, we have been doing a lot of work. In fact, if you look at Zydus investor presentation, there will be huge number of pages which are devoted to R&D efforts and what Zydus is doing. I think over last 3-4 years, that has paid off. You can share market price also is one indicator how it has paid off. How the investors have started recognizing companies' innovative efforts.
Sure. Ritesh, I put the same question to you. Not as much only on innovation, but on investment in technology. And I have the same question that you see a new technology today, you have your budgets already drawn up, you have short-term profit targets to deliver. And some of the easiest places where you can cut back is either innovation, technology. And we all know for the long term it's important. How do you balance the short term, long term, and how do you focus your investments in technology?
Thanks, Sudhir. First of all, let me again start by saying thanks for inviting me here and listening to my thoughts today. On this topic, Sudhir, 2 different perspectives. I'm a firm believer, I'll start where Nitin you started. Experiment and fail fast. I do encourage in the organization thinking of that space, but equally important is to experiment and scale up fast. The moment you know that you have got something which is, after experimenting, makes sense, equally important apart from failing fast is to scale up fast and get the right business impact. And I genuinely believe that today for every CFO, it is a most important job to create a winning business case for technology, for transformation in the organization. We are all very good when it comes to resource allocation that today there are 4 or 5 different priorities. How do I allocate money across those 4 or 5 priorities? But there's equally important a time dimension to resource allocation. Resource allocation to priorities of today and the resource we allocated for priorities of tomorrow. If in the performance management rhythm, the time dimension is not included, our choices of resource allocation will make impact short term, but will starve the organization long term. As Hindustan Unilever today, we are a very successful organization. We have a 60,000 crore business, more than 6 lakh crore market cap. And in my mind, there are 3 reasons why we are such a successful organization. We have strong brands which make us successful. We have outstanding talent in the organization that makes us successful. But equally important, the thought leadership for generations that we have displayed in the industry is what has made us future fit at all point in time. So today, for example, more than 1 million store in the country, we have our eB2B app called Shikhar, which has got launched. When you start to write a business case for an eB2B app, you will struggle to write a business case because there's not immediate payback in short term. But the moment you articulate a long-term strategy of your channel transformation, channel disruption, and what you could do on that highway once you create, there is far more amount of business you can end up creating. So the moment you build a strategy, along with that you drive innovation, which is digital and technology, a business case can be written in a very different way compared to just the cost which is involved in making it happen. So those are a few thoughts in your mind. Not only experiment, fail fast, but scale up fast. Do time allocation, resources for today and tomorrow. And third, as a CFO, create a winning business case of overall what that strategy will get deployed if with the technology and what impact can it create in long term for value creation. Those 3 dimensions in my mind are very important to look at whenever we look at any resource allocation for technology and disruption.
And Ritesh, tell us a little bit about how you communicate that to the markets. Is that a regular part of your conversations with the analysts on what you're doing for the long term, and do you see an appreciation of that coming?
So I've always seen the conversation with analysts, with investors, is always long-term and short-term. Rightly so, the market wants to know the short-term pulse and trigger of how the business model is getting delivered, how the short-term outlook for performance is, which is important. But equally, in my experience, I've seen a lot of patience in listening through why something is relevant and important long-term. We recently had our NDR in Singapore, and we were talking to our large investors, and there was huge amount of interest in understanding what can Shikhar, the example I quoted about eB2B app, which you put to more than 1 million store, can do with it. So there is equal amount of interest in the capabilities that we're building and what that can do in terms of long-term value creation. Because the frame of reference is indeed also changing to long-term value creation of the organization. And equally, they are interested to understand what you're doing to stay relevant in long term. So I guess there is appetite in the industry and in the investment market for it. It is our job, in my view, as the CFOs, to do a good explanation of both short-term levers, short-term priorities, long-term levers, and long-term capability building initiatives.
Well, it's really nice to hear because, you know, when you talk about what's ailing the markets and why sometimes we find pressures on companies, we call this because of the phenomenon of short-termism. But from what I heard from both Nitin bhai and you is that the markets do seem to appreciate what you're doing for the long term. Deepesh, you are very passionate also about long-term value. Any comments?
Yeah, Sudhir, first of all, I want to thank BCA for inviting me for this panel discussion. Really privilege and honor for being a part of the discussion here. I think, Sudhir, for us, long-term obviously means something which is, you know, from a technology lens, I always find it very difficult to find an IRR, you know, when there is a technology investment which comes to me. And therefore, I always, as a CFO, ask a question on what is the problem it is solving. If it's a long term, then it is probably a strategy problem or an intent towards going to a strategy. And if it is a short term, then is it something to do with a control or a consumer experience, or is it got something to do with financial inclusion? So I think, you know, it's always about balancing the long term and short term. And I do get asked that question from the investors as well, that if you're investing today, what's the frame of the long term that you're looking for? And I think my experience has been that the investors now are very, very open, and analysts are very open to hearing the story and intent more than anything else.
Oh, as I said, that's really good to hear because we've, I know a number of projects running globally on actually how to bring long-term behavior and, you know, get away on this treadmill, as we say, putting you CFOs on treadmills on quarterly performance, you know, which seems to be, all markets seem to go up and down with that, but clearly more maturity coming into the markets. One of the other dilemmas that we hear CFOs face or even management faces is to determine how do you calculate the return on investment on your technology, you know, on what you invest in technology. And, you know, it's very often not easy because technology is embedded in different parts of the business and even the costs are not always apparent. Whereas it's easy to quantify the cost of the software and the hardware, but the cost of management time and, you know, the cost of failure, as you mentioned. So very often it's very difficult to determine what is the ROI on technology. Rajani, your views?
So thank you, Sudhir, and very happy to be here and to be addressing all of you. ROI, while there are standard formulas for calculating return on investment on any investment, I do agree that anything on automation or digitization is quite vague. I come from industries which are heavy process industries. I've been in cement, I've been in oil and gas, and there it's rather easy because you tweak a continuous process to a small extent through automation or through AI tools. It is possible to see the result into the P&L rather immediately. So I'm quite pro to invest into automation with a quick ROI on the manufacturing side of the process. Then the vagueness starts to happen as we enter the sales and marketing process, wherein you talk of increased customer satisfaction, customer retention, repeat orders, etc. And that's where it starts to get vague because you're never able to separate the benefit coming from digitization and what is coming from the regular sales force. And as you move to the back end, it becomes totally fungible because here you start to enter into areas like productivity, more compliance, more security, and that is where you have most of the trouble. So what we do per se, as I said, is we focus heavily on the manufacturing part because that is where most of the value comes from the P&L side. And when it comes to the back office, especially for functions such as finance, for me it's more than the ROI, it is what is the one version of truth that is getting generated. I review how my team is able to eliminate duplication of work in terms of process or in terms of reporting different versions of truth because each controller has his own version of Excel numbers. And then I see how much they're able to focus on the business process and business process excellence. Because I want, for example, a sales controller to be spending time at the retail offices, talking to the dealers to really understand what's happening on the market rather than sitting in the back office and doing numbers to be presented to the management council. The most tangible thing that I look at, and though it sounds very, very basic, is I look at evolution from the last year costs in terms of to see whether we are really controlling the cost from the previous year. I do not go by the number of transactions. I definitely do not go by percentage of turnover because there are a lot of fluid things that get in there. So clearly 3 aspects in terms of measuring the ROI.
Okay, that's interesting. And Deepesh, you have a view on how you calculate the return on investment on technology?
Yeah, so I don't know if by saying this, I'm going to be a non-CFO comment, but sometimes I find Excel sheets pretty boring because, you know, we look for IRRs and in technology investments, it's hard to find them. And you know, it's a real challenge. But I look at 3 or 4 things. One, I think Rajani mentioned, has it saved cost versus last year or over a period of time? I think the second bit is nowadays we invest a lot in the technology to be able to get good, insightful MI for decision making. And if you make that decision, then, you know, how is it going to help you is another way of looking at it. As an organization, we are in oil and gas, but we are also FMCG. We play a lot on the brand. So anything that enhances consumer experience and enhances the brand value will always translate into a turnover or a profit. So that could be another criteria of calculating the ROI. And I think I mentioned that previously, if it solves a problem of a control or if it solves a problem of a compliance or brings in productivity. And I just want to give an example. I mean, it's a 4-year-old example, and UPI was not very prevalent that time. And we had this issue where, you know, in our ecosystem, we have like 500,000 of mechanics and truck drivers. And we were trying to see how is it that we can make a 10 rupee coupon reach them because they are our influencer, because there is an incentive policy. And when we were going with the business case for an example like this, it was very hard to really find out how millions of transactions will happen and you're going to make sure that there is better control as well as the consumer gets what he or she wants. And as a CFO, can I get that MI or insight on what's happening from distributor to dealer to a retailer to a workshop to a mechanic, which is like in the end of the ecosystem. So that was one of the digital projects. And I think when I put all of this together, all I wanted to summarize is say, it's just not the financials. There is much more beyond it. It's the people, it's the intent, it's what you're trying to do. And I think we as CFOs need a lot of judgment to be applied. Of course, you need to see what is there in the Excel sheet, but there is that softer aspect as well.
Sure.
Can I build on that, if you don't mind, Sudhir? So I think very similar thought, and let me again give an example from HUL. Whenever I come across a project which is long-term, difficult to put an ROI model around it, there's a method to approach that. And the example which I want to quote was, we have our own distribution centers, 40 plus in the country. And if today I want to go and approach and make all of them completely robotized, in which I'm able to do service to my retailers next day, within 24 hours as an order gets put to us. And this is dramatically different than the way we work today. Now, how would you put a business case to that? Investments to upgrade across all the 40 distribution center will be a multi-100 crore investment. And you're not sure about it. very difficult to put an ROI. You will make assumptions which might not borne out over next 5-6 years as you execute it. And hence the method to madness there is first break it down into bite chunks. Can we start small before we scale up fast? Pilot becomes an extremely useful way of addressing such large long-term investment needs. So you pilot in a geography. In our case, we went to Chennai, in south of the country. We created our first center, which is completely end-to-end robotized. What you do at that point in time, you can't put a full ROI business model, but you end up putting action standard. That if I set up this end-to-end robotized distribution center, what are the action standards which I think it should deliver? And then am I able to deliver that in a pilot way? Once you're able to deliver those action standards, then you know the business impact it is able to create when you study in that one geography the impact of a robotized end-to-end distribution center. That then gives me enough amount of inputs to create a business case at a national level, ROI model, that if at all I replicate this across all the 40 centers over the next X years and commit multiple 100 crores, that's the ROI payback I can have in the next multiple year. So in my mind, those are the learnings. Start small, do a pilot, put action standards around it, help you to then create a business case and then scale up a business case and scale up investment as well.
Sure, that's an interesting one. I'll come back to that, but Rajani, before that, yours.
No, I agree with the pilot method. I think that is something you typically do. As I was talking of manufacturing process, suppose we say we will reduce the power consumption in one of the process in one of the units, then you do a pilot and then you project it for the rest of it. But more importantly, there are some processes where it is not easy. You know intuitively that is something that is needed. We operate 6,400 retail outlets. You know intuitively that you have to monitor every one of them digital in terms of how the product is dispensed, whether he's blending something, whether he's having the right fire hydrant is managing, how is he running his payment system, because these are all distant, remote area ones. Probably 4,000 will be in cities, the rest of the 2,000 may be outside of the cities on secondary highways. So these kind of things are more intuitive, and I think more often than not, while you may not get the answer you want, you have to go based on intuition as a CFO to figure out which is the process where you really want to digitize and improve on automation front. So I think we go by gut feeling also sometimes, though that's not the answer that is expected. And you test it for a year or so, and then you move ahead to formally launch it full scale. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, gut feel eventually does play a role in many of these. Yeah. Ritesh, coming to your question on the pilots, and in your experience, how often would you have kind of stopped a pilot, or at what point of time would you call it off, saying, okay, I'm not moving ahead? Because there's always a lot of passion behind most of these projects.
I think one of the job as finance function, we have to take emotion out of experimentation.
Sorry?
We have to take emotion out of experimentation.
Yeah.
Sometimes as leaders, we do experimentation, we get so emotionally attached to it that at a point in time, the scorecard is crying, it is not working. But we're so emotionally involved, we don't want to cut the cord. So I think, and which is why the first principle, which Nitin Bhai mentioned earlier, experiment fail fast. I think we have to do that. Once you define action standard for a pilot, if it is not delivering the action standard, I think then we have to take emotion out of the conversation and cut the cord. Because then you are not trying to do the next experimentation, which is then getting starved of resource allocation, which is not fair. So I think usually it's emotion which comes in the way, and one has to de-link emotion with right action standards which are getting delivered and make it really objective in its understanding. And finance function, CFOs can do a big job in making it very objective assessment.
Sure. Yeah. Ashween, you have...
I just think I'll add to that while everyone's mentioned, and I'll just build on top of that. It's so interesting when, there's a different set of industries, we all come from different set of industries, different stage of the organization, right? So Tata Starbucks is in the 11th year of its operation, so very nascent. We're still investing ahead of the curve. So the interesting part is, and also you don't have much to draw from other organizations because you're kind of building the category for, in the country, the coffee category, right? What's interesting is what to pilot when there are so many ideas on the table, right? And it's so critical to be very, very objective about things, ensure there are enough KPIs in place to track, and you said remove the emotion out, but also put the KPIs in place to say what's working and what's not working. And then, of course, the emotional angle also comes in. But what to pilot also becomes so critical when there are like a couple of ideas on the table, and what takes precedence eventually is the consumer at the end of the day. And that's at the heart of all our investments.
So are you also saying, like Rajani, that sometimes, because consumer experience is something difficult to feel at that point of time, so would you use your gut feel sometimes in saying go ahead for a technology project as against hard financial numbers?
It does happen at times, but I think we also pilot. Like Ritesh mentioned, we don't go full scale until we've done a pilot, and that pilot is super useful. Use a specific territory, use a specific catchment, honestly, to see how it works, and then go full scale. I think that's very, very critical, but it's a combination, I will say, of gut plus objective numbers.
And you spoke about KPIs, so you're saying once the pilot is successful and rolling out, you have KPIs to evaluate whether the technology is successful.
Right.
And
so even before you adopt and do the pilot, there are KPIs in place. And one measures yourself as to where you're landing on those KPIs, and then check and adjust as well, right? So you don't shelve a pilot immediately. You also check and adjust to say what went wrong. And then once you've given that course and due time to that particular project, you've got to move ahead.
yeah.
If I may just probably build on the thought, I think very similar. The model which I end up deploying is, it has three different principles: size of price, ease of capture, time to value. Whenever you have a long list of various priorities to the point which you're making, how do you make a choice? What do you want to experiment with? And that's the framework I end up deploying typically. What's the size of the price for each of those items? What is the ease of capture of value of each of these items? And what's time to value? What's the time it's going to take to deliver value? Once you put these three parameters, it is very easy then to start making your choices. To your point, what do you want to pilot?
Yeah. But Nitin bhai, there's a lot of uncertainty very often at that stage, and almost if you're trying to see everything can be pinned down, it's not. There's a lot of uncertainty, and that's what innovation is about, right? Sometimes these people say, you just let me innovate. I remember we had one discussion where we were deciding whether to invest in innovation or not, and someone said, yeah, if the outcome is predictable, let's do it. So that's very difficult.
No, in technology, so my MD, Dr. Sarojil Patel, he is a tech-savvy person and keeps coming out with so many ideas. But once he asked me, Nitin bhai, what is the right way of calculating ROI on technology investment? And I lightly said, Sarojil bhai, there is no right way of calculating ROI. Having said so, there is a right approach to that. And how we have solved this in Zydus, one, we have a chief digital officer at organization level who, depending on our business lines and functions, decide broad areas where technology, digital, AI, etc. can make a lot of sense. But budgets are in a decentralized manner. Means the business and function is the budget, not chief digital officer. So all of them, they need to make out a business case. And as a finance person, I look at 5 different things and find out whether at least one of them is there or not. One is revenue expansion, second cost reduction or cost avoidance, capital reduction, capital avoidance. If I find one of these 5 there, I say there is a case. And then say, what is the conviction level of my concerned BU head or function head in terms of commercial justification, finance justification or business justification? I say, give any of these. And then leap of faith, as Ritesh also mentioned, somewhere the leap of faith ultimately comes into picture and say, okay, my business head, function head is very strongly convinced about that, and the budget is within the norms. So we say, in a year, how do we want to give? 100 crores, 200 crores? And then let all the people compete, and the priority rankings are given. That is the way we solve this. Having said so, there are so many other small, so to say, pilot projects where we don't look at any payback. We say this is a business imperative, more in terms of compliance, statutory requirement, tax part, statutory part, FDA part, we are highly regulated. So there, we don't look at anything like a payback period. Everything makes sense, which is a business sustenance part. Sure. That obviously takes the precedence.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. And let's move the conversation. We've spoken about making a capital allocation for technology, for innovation, possible ways of calculating ROI. And I agree, to some extent, there will be a judgment, element of judgment, gut feel, eventually in determining whether you are successful or not. I think the idea of pilots is very good to kind of experiment on a smaller scale to see what is the likely outcome which you can then extrapolate. There's a lot of interesting ideas on deciding how you allocate capital, how you determine the return on investment on that. But one of the, I think, biggest impacts that technology is having is also on the talent strategy of organizations. And I think we'll spend some time on this because there are several facets of impact of technology on talent. What is the kind of people you should have? What is the kind of organization structure that you should have? What can you continue to do in-house? I think there are so many facets of the impact of technology on your talent strategy. Ashween, can you tell us a little about what goes through your mind on talent and on the various aspects of talent? You can take us through some of that.
I think just to lay down some context, so we are actually opening 2 stores per week. That's the pace at which we are growing, right? So earlier last year, what we did was we embarked on a journey of finance transformation on which digitalization in finance was one of the key levers in that, right? And the reason behind that was to actually, grow with the pace of the organization and support a business really. And when we embarked on that journey, the first thing, in fact, we did was put a roadmap on the talent strategy, be it hiring, outsourcing, reskilling, and also ensuring that, we've got the right talent to lead us and take us ahead. And I think what's critical as part of this journey was to ensure that I have a clear roadmap which says with automation, without automation, what does my 5-year structure look like? And then accordingly take decisions. So that's the base premise with which we began. Now I'm going to break your question into 2 parts to say during and before the digitalization journey per se. I think the first thing is, while you've got consultants with you through this journey, the first critical point is that you need a team, internal team, to drive this journey ahead for finance function, right? And these are not conventional roles that are available in the market, digitalization in finance. It's not like a tax or an FP&A, right? So that's a tricky part, and what we've done through this is to ensure that we have a good, capability in the team, a mix of talent that has legacy and knows the processes in the organization, a mix of finance into IT background talent, and that's really helped us in this case. The second thing we did was the operating structure needed to be revamped, right? The operating model first needed to be revamped to enable automation in the first place. So we embarked on that journey, and along with that, the restructuring, the organization restructuring that came through that. And some examples on that were, created specialty pools for, say an accounts receivable reconciliation. We also, did centralization of our processes. So restructuring happened to enable digitalization, which would come in future, right? And the most interesting part is because digitalization is just around the curve, you've also got to be careful of how many resources you take on internally in-house, right? So one of the things we also did was to ensure that the transactional stuff moved out of the organization to the shared services or outsourced organization. And standing today, 50% of my finance function is actually outsourced, right? So all the transactional work moved there, and what stayed and stays inside the organization is largely strategic decision making. And as you're on the digitalization journey, which is approximately a 3-year roadmap, what would happen is the organization is also scaling at the same time, right? So you don't end up in a situation of hire and fire, so you don't take on more resources in-house, and then you take some temporary resources on the shared service side. So that's the critical point. The other part to it is post-implementation and the latter half of the during implementation journey. I think digitalization is the easier part of the journey. What happens around digitalization is the tricky part, which means change management, right? That's really, really tricky, and I think that's where a lot of focus and energy needs to go. So the way we worked through this is to ensure that we have the impacted teams on set, partner with us to co-create the process, co-create and decide the vendors for the automation, and so that they feel part of the journey. And enough trainings on change management, enough trainings to ensure that they're skilled to use the tools and to know what to do with the data that comes out from the tool itself. I think lastly, on the hiring of talent piece, I think one interesting point is that it's a bumpy ride. It's not all smooth. There will be a couple of hiccups in the journey. So talent also needs to be resilient and be agile to quickly check and adjust. So a very high ability to check and course correct and adjust oneself is something that's very critical. And when you're hiring talent, you just need to ensure that you take that into account as well.
Yeah, no, those are very interesting perspectives. And You know, you mentioned change management, and I want to explore that also a bit further. I'll come back to that question because there was a survey which was conducted on CFOs and other people in an organization other than CFOs. And they were asked the question of what are the kind of skills that you would like to have after the technology transformation. Whereas the CFOs didn't pick this up. In the rest of the organization, they picked up change management as one of the most important attributes of people they wanted in the finance function, you know. And so I think we should explore that. But let me come to you, Rajani, on the impact of two things I would like to ask you on technology. One is redundancies. Do you think that there are a number of redundancies that happen? How do you deal with that? And second is, whereas you may not, it may not just be a question of count, but of skill sets, that there may be individuals who just don't upskill with the latest technology. How do you deal with both these difficult situations?
Yeah, thank you, Sudhir. So I'm a bleeding heart, so we are not separating people per se. The first thing that we did was to develop a roadmap for a future-ready finance. We said it should not be incremental. What is it that we want the finance function to be? You know, something out of a sci-fi movie. This is what we want to be. This is where we are. Then we mapped all the manpower and the competencies that we have. There were a few we could reskill. There are a few we could not reskill. We have redeployed within the organization. It's a 16 billion organization. There is place to pass people around. Typically, these are people who are towards the later part of their career. So I guess we'll have to carry them into non-digital tasks for some more time. The most important thing was actually building this talent for the new era. While building is not so easy because there is really a shortage of talent out there. So when you go to hire, and COVID has made it even more difficult, a person who used to draw 10 lakhs now looks for a shift at 25 lakhs, nothing like 12 or 15 lakhs. So the talent has become prohibitively expensive. It's become extremely difficult to source. So while you try to build, it is also important. While you try to buy, it's also important that you build it internally to skill training, reskilling these people, etc. The second important thing while you're bringing these people on board is to remember that most of the first level of the organization are somewhere in their late 40s or early 50s, not really digitally savvy. So it's important for this team that is brought in to be protected and nurtured as well. It's very easy to kill them with the first small technological failure. When one report doesn't tally for 1 month or two, it's very easy to kill them. So what we have done is we have created this team which is in-house, which is also a bit of consulting to bridge the gap in the headcount that we have. And we have put them in a kind of incubation center called a transformation center, and they become the common pool for everyone to deliver on the future-ready finance goals, which is either fully digitizing the shared services or moving into monthly dashboards which are digitized, no Excel, everything to come out of BW, which is very difficult because the financial data does come out of BW, but not necessarily the production data or the sales data. So basically making sure that there is no Excel tying up that is happening. So this resource is protected and kept centrally and not left to everyone else. So this is not the ideal way to do it. I guess we will do it for a period of nurturing for about 6 months to 1 year, and then the plan is to transform them into the regular part. But to answer your question on redeploying, there's no separation of people, there's just redeployment into the organization at the moment.
You prefer that as an option to redeploy?
I think then it's very different for different industries. When I was in my earlier industry in cement with very thin margins, I would have probably separated. When you're oil and gas with huge margins, you tend to redeploy. I think again, it goes back to what your P&L affordability is and what is the HR angle. So it's not a clear-cut business case angle as far as I go.
Yeah. Nitin bhai, you were saying something.
So one point I would like to mention is that what in Zydus we have been doing is what I call reverse mentoring. What exactly we are doing is that while we have many people with long experience but may not be tech savvy, may not be very good in terms of technology understanding, typically in finance you have chartered accountants, but we are now a fine blend of other engineer MBAs who are good in terms of understanding of technology. They don't know pharma, they don't know, let's say, finance so well or accounting standards and auditing so well. So we say the seniors will teach them that part related to core finance, and also in the process learn the technology part from the juniors. Now obviously you need to have that culture, whereby you accept your juniors also teaching you. And that we have been successfully able to do to some extent. I think that's the experiment we are now taking the organization. Now HR has also now tried to look at that, what finance has done. In strategy also now started doing that, while in strategy also there are some engineer MBS working with finance person who is M&A, right? So that's the way I think culturally we are making this kind of changes of fine blending of technology as well as core understanding of finance.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you're actually seeing the finance function, the qualifications of people within that changing to have more data scientists and all other than just hardcore accountants. That's what you're saying as well. Yeah, that's interesting. Two things I would like to pick up. One is outsourcing. I think you mentioned that in terms of availability of talent, and Ashween, you also that after your technology transformation journeys or implementing these projects, and Ritesh for you as well, have you found you outsource some parts where you're not able to get the right skills? What are the kind of activities, and have you seen outsourcing happening more than you were doing before you adopted new technologies?
I think we have an in-house, most often people outsource shared services. So we operate a model in all the companies where I have worked, I guess probably except in Schneider where we have outsourced it to a third party. But I think with the evolution of technology, there are a lot of outsourcing firms that have emerged. May not be, I would not outsource for the core finance processes, but for digital, for implementation, for key projects, etc. Like KPMG, for example, or even smaller firms. I see a lot of mid to small size firms who have become extremely digital savvy, who come in very quickly, are able to fix the issue for you, hand over to you the deliverables and move on. So I think this market has erupted quite strongly after COVID, and India is really having a lot of talent out there. So I was talking about the hiring issues in terms of when you want to hire somebody, the kind of demands that they have, the kind of shortage of talent that you have. We are absolutely able to bridge this with a decent amount of outsourcing with good firms out there. And mostly it's the chartered accountants firms which have evolved and developed because they understand controls, they understand governance, they have invested in the digital tools, they have younger team members who are more agile. And so I think it's really easy to get people from outside.
I'll just add to that. I think what's interesting is that the outsourced partners are also investing in technology, and that's really great, right? But I think what does that lead to eventually? That's the shared services also at some point may not need the kind of quantity of people that they need today, right? So that's an interesting insight. So I think just building on to what people have said, my short message to my own team is keep upskilling yourself. One doesn't know how fast technology is going to replace some of these things, right? I was at a global conclave of the Starbucks team, and there are some countries who are using ChatGPT to draw their PPTs, right? That's interesting. And if one doesn't upskill themselves, technology is going to replace people faster than needed. So I think that's the broad message I'd like to leave from that.
Yeah. Deepesh, any experience on, do you outsource more post your technology transformation? Are you planning more outsourcing in the future?
Yeah, I think so. So we do have I would say a captive outsourced or captive organization which runs out of Pune and more than 2,000 people. And I think other than the basic accounting and as we call transaction processing, I think the revelation for me has been that outsourcing even in the field of or the processes around customer and customer experience and customer excellence and interaction are quite an insight. It's a revelation how when you outsource that can actually bring about a lot of efficiency through various tools, which you may not want to invest, but for an organization like ours, which is global, you can actually deploy globally and have a lot of standardization as well. And I think from just on the people piece, there is a huge opportunity for the talent today to also be a part of some of these captive or outsourced organization or shared services, as my colleagues have said, because that's also a different skill. That is a skill about being precision, getting efficiency, and apart from, of course, if you're in-house, then you are going to be much more strategic partner.
Sure. Yeah. Ritesh, you heard earlier Ashween speak about change management. And, I known your organization and you manage change every 2 years, you're almost trying to reinvent many of your processes and people. How do you handle change management? How do you industrialize change management?
I think I think you also called out a little while ago as well. For any transformation, that's a single most important element to get it right. We usually end up underestimating the impact of change management. The only good news is the amount of change that all of us are now navigating in our organization is become a reflex muscle for us now. And if that is not being developed as a reflex muscle, we will always struggle with any change that will end up happening. To me, change management and communication of the change both go hand in hand. Because sometimes we just don't communicate as to why we are changing and what we are changing. At the end of the day, if I'm changing something and if there is not something in it for the person who is the recipient of the change will never get done. So I think change management does have those two very important principles, A, of communication and what's in it for me. If those two things are not articulated, any change in my mind doesn't stick to in the organization. That's my deep learning with many change which I have led in my career. With those two things, you get it right, there's a much higher chance of us being successful.
Sure. And Ashween, for you, change management, you mentioned that as an important aspect of that.
Yeah.
What was in your mind? What's the kind of challenges you see on change management?
Right. I think similar to what he's saying is acceptance, right? So the process owners, what we did was we got the process owners and the digital transformation journey to work hand in hand from the onset to co-create the to-be processes and to co-create the digital journey. So what that does, like I mentioned earlier as well, is that it makes the process owner or the recipient of the technology feel like they've got skin in the game. They're being part of the journey, their thoughts are also taken into account. And I think that's really important because like he said, if you're going to not communicate the change and you're not going to make the team feel, that they're part of the process, I think it's not going to work according to me. And change management is as tricky as it can get. It can't be explained in theory, honestly.
Sure.
So I think the bigger thing is to communicate, to have enough trainings, to just be open about why we are doing it. I think that's very, very critical.
Sure. Okay, I'm going to ask only one more question on technology and then we move to sustainability so that we keep moving to different topics. And Deepesh, this is to you, what are the risks you see? Many companies are engaging into finance transformation or technology transformation projects. We spoke earlier about, the new technologies that we are deploying, whether it is AI, cloud computing. What are the big risks that you see of these transformations and what are the defenses that companies deploy?
Yeah, sure, Sudhir. Let me just answer this question in context of product technology because that's also a technology and it's very relevant for our business. And I'm talking here about electric vehicles. This is something which is right now creating a euphoria everywhere. And you just mentioned about sustainability. So by the way, that ticks the sustainability box as well, big time. Having said that, I think there is a question out there in the open, which is with electric vehicles coming in, what happens to automotive companies? What will happen to auto ancillaries companies? What will happen to auto components companies? Yeah, and there is a perception that there is an existential crisis also. So one part of the product technology is somebody thinking, yes, there is an existential crisis. And then there is this piece here, how do you be proactive to be able to counter that as a defense and be ahead of the curve? And I'm going to link this with strategy now because at least in our case, we're kind of thinking, if this is something that is affecting an organization which is in the similar industry, then can we play in that field? So we come up with EV fluids. Now that creates innovation. Can you work with mechanics and train them on electric vehicle technology? Because whichever way the technology will move, you will need mechanics to do some of that. So I think, Sudhir, the piece around technology and the risks in my view is there are these various risks. The defense is how proactive you are as an organization. And is the organization having the right mindset to be able to tackle them?
Sure. Okay, I think we've discussed technology quite extensively and if you have time, we'll take more of that in the Q&A. Let's explore our other topic, which is on sustainability. And, whereas we saw the chart and the audience sentiment that sustainability is very important and most of the people recognize the importance of that. Very often we try to say, and I would say is we make an attribute to say very positive things about ESG, but it is not always a win-win. There are often trade-offs to be made. And I think it needs a lot of maturity in the organization as also fortitude actually to say, yes, we are willing to make those calls. And I think, Rajani, you must have been tested most severely considering the industries that you've worked in, where you say, I want to grow fossil fuel, whereas, the ESG imperatives would be to say, no, let's move to renewables or alternative sources, or let's say the percentages should change. Yes. So how do you balance these conflicts that arise because of sustainability imperatives?
Yeah. It's such a joke that the oil and gas person gets the sustainability question, but which goes to prove that there is no one size fits all for sustainability, whether it's an industry or a country even for that matter, My current job is oil and gas CFO. Earlier I was a CFO for a cement company where there was significant amount of scope 1 emissions through the whole process of cement calcination. Oil and gas is more scope 3 because all of you are polluting by using the fuel to drive. We only generate the fuel. And before that, I was with energy management where we were talking of conserving energy between production and consumption, in the distribution chain. So it's very different for every industry. Now, if I were to take a step back and look at the context of a country per se, if you look at what has happened in the recent COP28, the way India has positioned itself in terms of how we will use and deal with fossil fuel, how we will deal with renewable, I think that's the case in point, right? We went right ahead and said we are not going to delink ourselves from fossil fuel. It is the stage where we are in terms of economic development. We need the fuel to help us to fuel the economy, to use the same word again. Without it, India is not going to be a major economic power. So there is no way that we can sign up to delink ourselves from fossil fuel. You are seeing that the country is opening up thermal plants, even as we speak, which it had stopped a couple of years ago. But having said that, it doesn't mean that we say we go whole hog on black fuel and focus only on economic development. At the same point of time, we have launched this One World, One Sun, One Grid campaign. We have put out a renewable target which is far larger than any other countries across the globe, and we are investing heavily. We have the FAME, we have the EVs, we have subsidies which are coming for getting into greener and greener energy. So I think that's the balance which my companies in different forms are also doing. While we cannot save too much, scope 1 emission for oil and gas is only 10%. That is something we can control. We stay within the sustainability framework which is defined by the government, but beyond that, there is very limited scope in these heavy industries for us to do something totally green and out of the contrary, because there is no replacement of fuel for people to move from one place to the other. Even if you have to have electricity, you have to burn coal to get the electricity. There is no renewable yet which will provide you round-the-clock service for power. So there is a range anxiety that is created by electric vehicles as well. So while we adhere to the regulations in terms of the industry specific, we do a lot more beyond it to try to balance the impact that we cause on the economic sense on the carbonization front. Whether it is in terms of using all ancillary power which gets converted to renewables, making sure that we do not use any grid or any coal power for anything which is non-core production process. So we diversify, planting mangrove trees, and I think most of the companies tend to do this, and that is how we are totally diversifying into non-fossil fuel for the other part of the green energy part. One thing that is important to say from the context of the country, and I think this is really important, when you look at the Western world, there is a carbon tax. There is a tax in the Nordic countries, for example, about $100 per ton of CO2 that you emit. India doesn't have a carbon tax. There is a landfill tax. For every bag of garbage that you throw out, you give 5 euros. It doesn't exist in India. There is the COE part in countries as close as Singapore, where to put a car on the road, you have to pay multiple times of the car price to be able to get the car. So India neither has a carbon tax which pinches us. On the other hand, doesn't even have a green premium, wherein you say, okay, fine, I'll invest in a product which is more greener. Will the consumer pay more for it? I don't think the country is ready to pay more for it as well. On top of this, any green sustainable investments that you do have a very long gestation period of 10 to 12 years. If you were to set up a solar plant and you were to set up a thermal coal plant, the payback ranges from 2 to 3 years for a thermal plant to 10 to 12 to 15 years for a solar plant, because the load factor is very different. So I think this is the environment where we are operating in. Today, I think there's still a large amount of reliance for the sustainability agenda to be driven out of the goodness of corporates. And that's where the good corporate ESG frameworks, and that's where the board comes in, that's where the BRSR standards come in, where you're actually publishing what you're doing and everybody in the world is watching you. That's where the next generation is looking to come and work with you. They don't want to work with companies which are completely black. So I think we are today in this goodness of the companies to drive the green agenda. Not necessarily framework driven is what I would say. So sorry for the long answer, but I think this is something I'm really passionate. We need to drive this more and more, but I think there needs to be some green premium for the companies to adopt this and to help the companies to move forward. I think the government and the industries need to bring in the green premium.
Yeah, no, that's a very useful perspective from, particularly coming from you from the oil and gas sector, because the idea is not to eliminate fossil fuels, but is to reduce emissions. I think that is the whole concept, and to find ways to do that. Ashween, in your industry, which is a bit different, what's your experience on, what are the kind of trade-offs you've had to make?
Okay, I think sustainability and long-term value creation, I think at a good topic. I mean, it's a fantastic topic. I think I'll narrate a short story, probably that will give you an insight on this. So this is in 2008, where our global CEO, Harold Schultz, came back as the CEO for the second time, right? And at that point in time, the company had lost its market value by 50%, simply because of the global financial crisis that happened in 7-8, right? So that's the, think of yourselves in those times. And this guy comes in, he puts top of his priority a 13-point agenda on saving the planet and sustainability as his key focus. And the analysts are perplexed at that, saying that why would this guy do this at a point in time when your sales are at the peak bottom in terms of, in its history, and why would somebody do that? And not only did he achieve the agenda, but he achieved more than that. And what does that do to the performance, right? The company outperformed its peers. It not only came out of the financial crisis, but came out significantly faster than others, and actually outperformed its peers on for a comparative size of the, for a comparable peer on a risk-adjusted basis, right? Now, why did that happen, right? 2-3 things. So the agenda that was there on sustainability was largely around regenerative agricultural techniques. It was around fair pricing, incentivizing the farmers, 100% ethical sourcing, etc. Right? Now, what he did with this was actually, by doing all of this, create a supply chain, a resilient supply chain, which could actually absorb any kind of environment or economic shocks. So that's first. The second thing that this did was that it hit the chord with the consumers, because the company actually aligned itself to the deep consumer sentiment at that point, which was towards supporting sustainable businesses. And what it did was reignited the emotional attachment that consumers have, on sustainability. And which is why I think the company came out faster and better than others. So this is what it does. This example clearly states what sustainability can do and how it can drive value creation. But again, this is not a short-term story. It's a story of 10 years. It's a story after investing $70 million in sustainability. So I think what I draw from this, Sudhir, is that the trick lies in translating your sustainability factors to investment opportunities. So I think that's the balance that one needs to play with, and I think eventually in the long term it all works out.
Sure, but again we come back to the long term and the short term, and I think we have 4 listed companies. So let me ask them that, do you think the investing community again gives credit to you for sustainability, or it's like a good to do things, you have very nice annual reports, but when it comes to valuations they don't bother about it?
No, I think it's on the organization, first of all, to prove why it is so much integral to the business model. In our case, we know that a business which is sustainable is also able to create superior business value long term. The moment you're able to communicate that, people get it that there's a value attached to it. I'm a firm believer you cannot operate business and sustainability at a sweet spot. A spot at which we can meet business needs, at a spot at which you can drive a business which is sustainable. The moment you keep looking for a sweet spot, it'll never work. It has to be the same spot. It is not sweet spot, but the same spot at which we have to work the business, and it has to be sustainable. The moment you're able to integrate in that way the business and sustainability, you're able then to demonstrate the amount of value it's going to create. Huge amount of interactions which I've had with investors and analysts. They value in today's time an organization which is able to build purpose and sustainability in its business model. Why? Because we know also in medium and long term, if a business is not sustainable, it will not have a chance to compete well. Because consumers will make a preference. Again, we have data at Hindustan Unilever. There are brands which are purposeful, and we know that those brands grow ahead of the brands which don't have purpose so strongly associated at the heart of it. So it makes a business impact of running a business which is sustainable. So investors are making a choice. Why? Because consumers are making a choice in the first place. And if consumers are going to reject your business model because it is not sustainable, it will be very difficult to create value. So hence, in my view, it's integral, and hence the idea is to look that as the same spot, not at the sweet spot.
Not the sweet spot, yeah.
In fact, I would say, Sudhir, that long-term investors really value how the company is working on sustainability, because they are, definitely concerned about the long-term value of shareholders' wealth. And therefore, and I also believe that whatever trade-off, we have been talking about, there are so many win-win situations, on sustainability, like renewable power, for example. We have gone for hybrid power plant in Gujarat, and the hybrid power policy is such where, somebody is investing, you co-invest up to 26%. And I can tell you the payback period is less than 1 year for your investment, less than 1 year.
Less than a year.
Okay, and many of the efforts that we do in terms of recycling waste, in terms of packing material, in terms of looking at the size of packing, the thickness of that, gauge of that, all those things, while they help in terms of sustainability, in terms of reduction of usage of paper, reduction of usage of plastic, etc., they also help economically. So I believe that economic prosperity, environment, protection and social justice all can coexist.
Right. Well, that's good to hear again. It's heartwarming what you said in terms of long-term value appreciation by the investing community. Eventually, I think that's very important, is how a financier is looking at it, how the people are putting money looking at it, and the fact that people appreciate the long-term purpose of an organization. So that's good to hear. Let me see if we can pick up questions from the audience. Just give me a second. Okay, I'll read out the question, and then maybe one of you like to pick this up. This is, what are your views about outsourced CFO services from the point of view of a firm providing the aforesaid service and from the point of startups availing the said service? So this is a question which has received a lot of support in terms of number of people asking this question.
I personally think it's a fantastic service, because mature CFOs who are able to provide guidance to startups on a part-time basis, they have the ability to spread their knowledge and their skills. They will be probably an overweight for a startup in that sense, for them to engage mentally as well as for them to be financially paid back by the startup. But if they are able to give them on a service orientation as a part-time, I think it's a fantastic way to get the best of the both worlds. So I think I'm really happy that these services seem to be emerging, not enough, but I think I see a lot of them emerging. It will give you, when you know the CFO who's associated with this startup is also coming of a certain pedigree, it also gives the startup a lot of value when you are trying to work with them. So I am totally for it.
And I guess otherwise startups may not be able to access that type of talent, which you could do if it's an outsourced and you're just kind of taking a part of the time rather than the full time of a CFO. Sure. Okay, this one is not on technology, innovation or sustainability, but it impacts me. So let me ask this. As CFOs, how do you see audit as an activity? What do you expect from audits? Insightful or a post-mortem exercise?
Let me give a stab to it. I think the extremely crucial activity, important for the board, equally important for the CFO. There are always, in my mind, three levels of defenses. We have our system, processes, controls. They need to operate. There has to be management review, which becomes the second level of defense. And of course, the third level of defense then happens to be audit. And all three are important, but I would always resort to audit as a third level of defense. Only if the defense 1 and defense 2 are not getting done. And in my mind, one doesn't need to see audit as a cost or an activity which is going to be a distractor. It does add value. There's a humongous value in having, thank you. There's a humongous value in having that external reinforcement and assurance that everything in the organization is up to a standard which is industry recognized. Because whoever comes in audits brings perspective of not only our organization, but the practices and the issues that have been seen in other organizations. And there's a value in that exchange of knowledge. So I do believe it's an extremely important activity, not only from a governance perspective, but also as a learning organization to get our act right.
And you won't substitute me for a robo, right? Okay. Ashween, this one is directed to you. Can you share your recipe for turning data into actionable insights, considering your experience in crunching valuation numbers at Deloitte and leading sales finance at Colgate Palmolive?
Wow, so this is somebody who personally knows me, I think, in the audience, but fantastic question. Okay, so I think first and foremost is, I'm going to talk about how technology and how we've used that and how I've used my previous experience as well. So I think the first things, like I said, we're still a nascent organization, 11 years, etc. The first and most important thing is to appreciate what data can do, right? And the power of holistic data. So, as soon as, a year back or 2 years back, we actually implemented Data Lake and Power BI. And the value that's added is amazing, right? So, what it does is actually sources all data from all our sources, which means if you walk into a store, you can visualize this. It actually sources data from the POS, which is the point of sale, our mobile app, the customer loyalty program, any source of data, even the delivery aggregators, it puts it all into one place. And the power of holistic data is amazing, right? So it leads to quicker decision making. It also ensures that data synergies, right? And I think my experience over the last couple of years is to say that the power of data can only be amplified if you use it well. And I think that's something that I'd leave with people here. Yeah.
Okay, Deepesh, this one is for you. The question is, with the EV industry booming, how does Castrol look to adapt and be relevant as a company?
Yeah, no, great question. And thank you for the question. I think, as I was mentioning earlier, EV is clearly being seen by us as an opportunity. And I think it's a fantastic move to get electrified in terms of the vehicles. As an organization, we're looking at 5 big things in EV. Firstly, the EV fluids. Any vehicle will need EV fluids, which is coolant, greases, transmission oils. So that's something that we have a product, and that's already there with almost, I would say, 80% of the EV manufacturers in India where Castrol supplies it. The second piece on electric vehicles is really the service and maintenance. Whether you have EV or ICE engine, you will still need to repair them, and that's where Castrol is playing. The third piece is the mechanics, because I mentioned earlier that you need to get the mechanics skill being enhanced, and that's a role that Castrol is playing in that. What else goes in EV? There is no lubricant, but there is battery. So how can you work on the battery and have the thermal management IP? And that's something that we are looking at, because we've heard of a lot of incidents, and safety of an electric vehicle is very, very important, whether it's 2-wheelers, 3-wheelers, 4-wheelers, or a truck. So that's another area that we are clearly looking at. So I think it's an ecosystem that we will have to build. And lastly, when you put the sustainability hat, and I think Ritesh mentioned about it, you have to be on the right spot. So it's an and conversation, sustainability and business. And therefore partnering with others, OEMs, etc. Is very important, because it's not you as an organization who's doing all this just for competitive advantage. You need to take the whole ecosystem along with you. And we're trying to play a very important role in partnering with various organizations and OEMs to see how the technology is going to evolve. Like we spoke earlier, there was a technology, now the technology changes, yeah, and then people become redundant because somebody's got expertise. Same is the case with EV technology. It's rapidly changing. So how do you invest to be on top of it? So we're investing a lot of money. We invested about 500 crores in UK Technology Center to make sure that we bring learnings from other parts of the world where EV is more dominant, like China and Western world, and bring it to India, set up the infrastructure. And we need to work with the government to do that as well. So I think it's a fantastic play which serves the sustainability agenda as well as the business agenda.
Sure. Okay, I get one question, and I guess all or any of you could take this. The question is on what are the types of assignments that small or medium-sized CA firms can work on with large corporates like yours? Yeah. Maybe each one of you can pick up one or two ideas.
Let me just add, start. No, there are many areas. We know there are assurance needed in multiple areas, which are only getting manifold, be it an area which is audit of financial transactions. Now, non-financial transaction assurance has become a big area. And I think and at this stage, the capability is not well established everywhere. And in my mind, this is a chance to develop deep capability of non-financial reporting assurance. Is an area, I think, is an area which we will keep looking for more partners to work with, and an area which people can create a big business in my mind.
Sure. Rajani?
I think for us, it's the combination of this digital and accounting skills. I think while there are the digital people who exist out there and there are the internal accounting team, I think the ones who can merge these two are really missing in the market. Everything revolves around financial data, everything revolves around reporting, but has to have some oversense from a governance point of view, which only a chartered accountant can bring. So I think we are in a position to develop those skills because we have the foundational skills of governance, accounting principles. If we were to only develop the digital skills, I guess that's a huge potential, and there's a huge area opening up as well, which is already open. So I think that is one area we would definitely look to. Rather than go for just an IT person, a CA plus IT is
CA plus IT is
absolutely
So
there,
one area I can think about is looking at internal audit and other aspects of a subsidiary companies, both in India as well as abroad. So many Indian companies have their subsidiaries abroad. All of them may not be very big, and therefore if apart from internal audit, in terms of even the proprietariness, how the business is getting conducted, the governance, control aspects of that subsidiary, I think those are the areas small firms can look into.
So I think everybody mentioned about the audit and other activities, which is attested engagements or certification. I see a huge opportunity for small and medium firms to partner with organizations and the finance function of also we helping develop your resources in terms of, giving an experience into the organization. I mean, it's an assignment, but there is a huge opportunity to work in different parts of the business and finance function to be able to work and then go back and learn and, enhance their own firms as well. Because that skill set development, it's not about a business transaction. It's more than that. Because that capability that is developed, I think will help the firms also to partner with other organizations.
That's a great idea as well. Yes,
I think just one line. I think as we've embarked on the finance transformation journey, one of the things we've done is clear up and strengthen our processes to be more scalable. We've actually used services of organizations and small CA firms to come and support us and help us on that journey, because I need an invisible organization to come and support me on that. So we've used those services as well.
Sure. Thank you. There are some questions which have been addressed to me, but today I'm asking the questions. Yes, sir. Okay, I think we've dealt with some of the most important questions here, but I don't want to lose this opportunity. Maybe a couple of minutes. We had some interesting things on technology, and I'll put this again to all of you, is on Gen AI, which is today a buzzword. is what are the kind of use cases you're seeing on Gen AI? And, again, if Ritesh would like to start and anyone else would like to add, yeah.
So there are 3 areas at Hindustan Unilever we are working on. First, within finance function, the entire area of forecasting. We do run our business in which you make a forecast, and then basis that you guide the business in terms of resource allocation. And forecasting from sales to cost to profit can take a huge amount of time. And by the time the forecast is made, actuals come, it might just be dated. So using machine learning in generating forecast, in my view, is a massive use case for AI. And my intention is to ensure that we don't have to forecast all 12 months in the year. Can we forecast half the months in the year and balance half the months? Can machine generate a forecast and we do a risk ops analysis on top of that? There is one large use case, and as we speak, we're deploying in our business. Second, the entire area, the point that you were making earlier, Ashween, of data. The data is just becoming too much for a typical human being now to process and generate insights from it. Our ability to deploy at scale performance cockpits using internal data, external data, 1P data, customer data, and then generate insights, not only for developing and using efficiencies to reduce cost, which is an objective which was there relevant at a point in time, but today developing and driving growth is a larger objective in my view that data analytics can end up driving. So that's the second use case we're working on, which is to develop a performance cockpit, which is trying to bring all different kind of information together, internal and external, and drive to business insights. And third is today's the time we have to stop doing robotics in terms of bots. All of us have tried to put bots on individual areas of the business. They become inefficient after a point in time. Ability to create digital twins, where you're able to stitch multiple bots together and create almost a role end-to-end in itself. And we have done 2 pilots within our company of digital twins. It is very powerful. And once you deploy learning AI into that, it's able to self-innovate itself and be relevant. Are the 3 use cases I have seen within finance function, which we have been able to successfully implement.
And Ashween, next time I walk into your store, are you going to have someone tell me this is your coffee?
Okay, let me actually give an interesting one for that. So we actually did a pilot of smart cameras which actually enable vision analytics. And what that did was actually track the consumer movement in the store. And with that, what did we use it for is a couple of things. Look at the cost and time to serve the customer. We also, looked at store optics and can we change the layout, reduce the size of the store, etc. The third thing is productivity, other productivity and efficiencies, including how can we redeploy our marketing investments better. And all of this helped the bottom line eventually. Another interesting insight that came through this was we realized the amount of coffee that a consumer left on the table, and we realized that Indians are not used to drinking large portions of coffee. And with that, we actually readjusted our and resized our coffee size and called it, there was a pico size that came out in some of the markets and some catchments.
Did you reduce the price as well?
Yes. That, I was just coming to that. We also addressed the affordability.
That's the accountant in me,
We address the affordability also with that. So in certain catchments in Mumbai and certain small cities, you'll find coffee at below $200.
That's nice. Great. Anything else on Gen AI? Any of you are experimenting with that? No. Great. Thank you. I think this has been a fascinating panel for me. Lots of learning here. And thank you again, all of you, for your patience and listening and all that. Thanks again. Thank you.
Thank you for being patient till 7:30 listening to all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.